Greetings, Lilians. It is the 4th of September. I finally got chapter 14 written, and I've started illustrating it again. These are actually a couple pages from last week where I've started to get back to illustration. It's funny, like, I haven't drawn leyline stuff in almost a month because I've been working on writing for it. And it's always wild, like, getting back into the swing of it, into the groove of it. Is like, I'm slower than I'm used to being. I'm used to being able to just like, oh, boom, pencils, boom, inks, finished. And I'm slower than I was, like just a month off of not doing it regularly. And the part that threw me the most is I'm like, how do I draw these characters? What do they look like? I don't even know. What's Thomas' face shape? Who knows? And I'm still trying to decide if I want Joe to be growing his hair out or not. So it's always funny getting back into the rhythm of it, especially since I'm trying to go from 0 to I'd like to do more than normal because of that earthquake feeling. So we'll see how this week works, but I hope to kind of get back into the groove, back into the rhythm of creating, and sort of hit that stride again where it just kind of comes very easily and lopes along. I'm also working on some editing job, a creative consulting, developmental editing job for a client. I am really proud of this client. She first reached out to me, maybe it's a year ago. Has it been that long? Good Lord, I don't know. Maybe not that long. With kind of the first chunk of her story, and then recently sent me the second chunk of her story, and the growth and the improvement are just top notch, and I'm so impressed by her and her willingness to take in feedback, to keep learning, to keep at it, to stay determined. It's so easy to get discouraged, and often when people get negative feedback or any feedback, they also get very defensive. This client has never done that. She has always just been like taking it in, trying to improve, trying to get better, and it really shows. And I'm really proud of her, and I'm really happy to have been a small part of that journey. And I'm really excited to see where she continues to grow and continues to sort of, evolve as a storyteller. And yeah, those are the clients that I feel the best about, where I view my job not to tell you. I view my job as observing. I try to take in what the other person wants to do, and then I look at what they've done, and I try to see and observe how has what they've done compared to what they said they want to do, and what things are holding that back, what are supporting that, what are other takes and other approaches that they can use to kind of look at what they're writing differently, and kind of make those two things, get close together, mesh more clearly for the audience and for a viewer who's is from that outside, who doesn't have everything in their head that the writer has. So giving someone else the tools to move forward on their own. I don't want to write people's stories for them. That is not my job. My job is to help them bring out the best version of the story they have inside, and to ultimately make my job obsolete for them, in a sense, because they've gained so much skill that they can do a lot of what I'm doing for them on their own. That is with the caveat, of course, that we always have something new to learn. I myself have learned how important it is to get outside perspectives, so that I can, no matter how much more I learn about storytelling, the more I learn about how there's this fascinating intersection between the conscious and the unconscious. I was talking with Corey about this yesterday, like what the nature of writing, the nature of of how writing, I believe writing in many ways it isn't always, but it can be a self-healing act. It is a way for us to tell ourselves the stories that we need validated, to put out into the world the narratives that we wish others would say to us, that we could experience in our own lives. To solve the problems through characters that we struggle with ourselves, but in a fragmented way, in a way that, like when you're doing a tabletop role-playing, it's often easiest to take a fragment of yourself and take that fragment and crank some of those issues up to 11 and explore that, where it isn't you, but it is you to a degree. It's not you with the other components, the other moderating factors. And I was saying to Corey that it's, an odd way, if you become too conscious of your writing, it becomes very hard to create, because now you're self-conscious of what you're making and questioning, and all the mental processes that have created maladaptive coping mechanisms get in and start to judge and take apart and we deny ourselves the messages we need to hear when that happens. We deny that unconscious truth that otherwise we could let come out, because we weren't aware it was there until we look back on it and go, oh, that's my worldview, or I struggled with that, or this is a problem that I overcame when I wrote this and didn't even know it. When we become conscious too much, it undermines our ability to effectively create. When I first started going to therapy, that was a big scare for me. I was really worried. I think people who are depressed often worry that if they start addressing, they take medications or they start getting therapy or whatever it is to help address that depression, that they will somehow lose creativity. Because I think a lot of people, especially because of that stupid starving artist belief that our culture has, you have to suffer for your art. No, you don't. Like, not in the sense that people mean it. In a sense that it is hard to face down your deepest truths. Yes, that is difficult. One could even perhaps call it suffering. But that does not mean we have to wallow in pain or poverty or unhappiness. None of that stuff is necessary. But I was still really worried when I first went to therapy. Am I going to destroy my ability to write? Am I no longer going to be able to create? Creativity comes from pain. And what I found was, like, for the first couple weeks when I first started looking back on my work and became very aware of it, it did hinder for a couple weeks my ability to create, because I was so like, what does this mean? What does this mean? I wanted to write this piece, and what does that mean? And I couldn't stop psychoanalyzing myself and my own work. But after about 2 weeks, I was able to just let that go. And now what I have found is I've become more able to recognize when I am tapping into that vein, into that unconscious vein, more directly, when I am writing more directly about things that are close to my heart. And instead of making it harder, it kind of sends a light bulb often where I'm like, oh, what I need to do is really dive into this. And I know it's going to be hard, so I can approach it to give myself the best advantages possible. I can really make self-care a priority, and I can really sit down with myself and dive into what makes this tick for the character, but also for me, and kind of work with both that unconscious and that conscious. But instead of, it's kind of like the difference between it's deep sea diving when you're prepared and you know that's what you're going to do, and you've got all the proper equipment, and you've got support and your team's ready to go. That's what I can do now, is deep sea diving with a crew. Before, what I was doing was unconsciously putting cement shoes on and jumping into a river. I didn't realize it because I didn't know that's what I was doing. I didn't know that's how I was connecting. So it actually made a lot of those writing processes a lot harder, because I'd hit blocks and then I'd blame myself. I'd hate myself. Like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I write? Why is my story crap? Blah, 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 blah. I still have those, but I'm more likely to get out of those blocks faster because now I know that they are a sign that I need to dive into something that's hard. And going to therapy has given me that awareness, which is fantastic. So I don't remember how I got on this topic. Oh, writing, the unconscious versus the conscious. The thing that I said to Cora, the craft of writing, the craft of developing who you are as a storyteller and your skill level, ultimately is developing and practicing enough conscious processes so that when we take our unconscious and we pour it into this conscious framework, the end result as a starting place is of better quality than it was before we developed that craft. And then we edit that piece. So the better we get as storytellers, the more we learn about how structure works or characterization works, the more that we intake quality material from a variety of sources, the more that we kind of shape that. It's almost like a mold, and the unconscious is like this free-flowing batter. The more well-built that structure is, and the more baked total the end product is, as opposed to being half-baked or spilled out all over the oven and making a huge mess. Like, it's not the greatest analogy. It's not quite holding up as well as I want it to, but I hope that you kind of see where I'm going, where it's an interesting interaction between conscious, developed skill in that unconscious emotion, psychological processes, complexes, if you want to get all Jungian about it, which, since I go to a Jungian analyst, I do. It's a fascinating interaction in that when you have both working in tandem and working in sync, that's where you get some really magical material. Because if you lose that unconscious piece and it just becomes fully conscious writing, it becomes very dry, and it often also becomes very, very pedantic because the unconscious piece is still there, but it's sort of trapped and it goes sort of sour. Whereas if you have only unconscious writing, then you have material that just sort of slops all over the place, has no clear sense of direction or purpose, and ultimately cannot be focused in any way, cannot be directed in any way, because it's hyper-organic. I think structures often become emergent at that point, but if you're trying to say something, it's very hard to say something when you're writing purely from the unconscious and have it be clear to an audience. It's both. Writing, I think, is valuable. I personally towards feeling like fully unconscious writing is a little more valuable than fully conscious writing, but that's my personal preferences. But yeah, that mix where you have both, where you have something that has clarity, that has consistency, but also has that emotive, personal spark that cannot be forced. Those two things in tandem are a beautiful thing and create those stories that really resonate so beautifully with people. They may not be popular, but they do create resonance. And hopefully that leads to other people being excited about it. You know, it may be that the story you're writing is only for you. And if that's the case, that's great too. You will become a better person through going through that process, because you will learn about yourself. You will learn how to solve a lot of these problems, and how to give yourself hope and alternatives when there seem to be none. That's, I think, the power to the writer of the act of writing. So this is just some thoughts on the unconscious, the conscious, and writing in general and creating in general. So yeah, I wish you an equally creative week. And if you have some thoughts on how the melding of these two aspects of the creative process works for you, your process, how you've experienced those different kinds of writing and writing from those different kinds of places, I'd love to hear about it because I like talking with you guys. So that's it for me this week. I will see you next week.